Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we'll discuss the explosion outside India's Red Fort and, of course, its implications. We also take a look at conditions at the jail where Jagtar Singh Johal is currently being detained, get a flavour of Indian so-called justice. And we'll take a look at the rising backlash against India after its programme of anti-Sikh transnational repression. Not only is it now being regularly raised in the British Parliament, but mainstream news outlets around the world are starting to talk more openly about India's extrajudicial murders of Sikhs around the world. And with it, every news item lays the next legal stepping stone in the road towards the establishment of Khalistan. But all this and more on today's show. But joining me, as always, is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus. And tomorrow we're going to, I pushed a few stories tonight to tomorrow so we could cover the explosion that happened in New Delhi today, or late yesterday. Now, those stories, of course, there's a huge honor. Canada Post has actually released a stamp that honors Sikh soldiers in the Canadian military. A huge, huge event. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. And we'll also talk about how the BBC scandal is actually potentially going to harm not only mainstream media, but also media outlets like ours, while giving a foothold to the India government's propaganda machine. And we'll discuss that tomorrow night. But for now, stick around for tonight's episode. And don't forget that we are looking forward to the end of the show when your comments make the grade. So again, don't forget to send your comments or just send a simple message of hello or where you're watching from. We always love to know where our viewers are. So back to you, Angus, as we get on with the show.
Indeed. And James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, we will, at the end of the show, take a look at loads of great comments which have been filling up below the video. So thank you to our wonderful audience for what's been coming in. Right, James, as always, loads to get through. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
Well, a tragic event that took place in New Delhi, just close to the Red Fort, where tens of thousands of spectators or tourists gather every single day. It's estimated actually about 17,000 tourists flock to that attraction each day. Today was a little different. There was an explosion. Now, exactly what happened is still up for debate and under investigation. However, it does appear that it was much larger than just a simple car explosion, from a non-threatening manner, we'll say. Cars that explode don't generally send steel and shrapnel over 20 meters away, including, unfortunately, body parts as well of those who were close by. It is coming out right now. There are differing numbers between 8 and 9 individuals who lost their lives in this explosion, as well as 20 or more who suffered injuries. This has been a major, major news event around the world, but again, we need to look at it from a point of perspective, and that is where we look. Again, we don't know what the actual cause or what the actual intent was. However, I do believe that it is safe to say that it was not just an innocent explosion. Here we are going to take a quick peek at some of the different reports that are coming in from around the world, and we're going to start right here at home in Canada with the CBC. Now, as you can see, they are reporting 8 people have deceased and 20 others who were injured near the historic Red Fort in a densely populated area of the Indian capital of New Delhi. This happened just after around 5 or 6 p.m. local time in New Delhi. The exact cause of the blast, again, we don't know, but this is a city that is home to over 30 million people, which is really hard for us to fathom in Canada because our city populations really, in Metro Vancouver, for example, it's about 2.5 to 3 million in the Metro Vancouver area. So it's hard for us to fathom this amount of people in that small region. However, it shows that this is a very precise or a targeted ideal in terms of the location. It wasn't somewhere in a small rural community or out in a farming community. It was a strike right in the heart of the nation. Now, this is something that they haven't seen in decades. The closest resemblance was a suitcase bomb outside of a courthouse back around 2011. Prior to that, you're looking at explosions that were going on at the hands of the Islamist extremists and others throughout the 80s and 90s. But it has been something they are not familiar with over the last several decades in the capital of India. And we'll take a look here at the report from the CBC, or just a quick look at the aftermath of the explosion here. As you can see, just vehicles just ripped to shreds. And I mean, that has got to be a very powerful device in order to be able to wreak that much damage and havoc on that area. Let's take another look at their actual news report here as opposed to just the aftermath video.
A major investigation is underway in India after a car exploded near a metro station in New Delhi. At least 8 people are dead and another 20 injured. The blast occurred near a busy trading hub, prompting officials to place several major cities on high alert. The CBC's Selena Shifty has the latest.
We don't know a lot yet about what exactly led to this explosion near Delhi's Red Fort, a historic landmark and tourist attraction. Investigators are on the scene, forensic experts as well, teams with India's National Security Guard and National Investigation Agency, all of them combing through charred auto parts to try to find some clues to piece together what exactly happened. What we do know is that the blast occurred right before 7 in the evening, a very busy time in a crowded area, very close to Old Delhi's market bazaars. According to Delhi's police commissioner, a slow-moving vehicle approached a red light, stopped, and then that vehicle exploded. The commissioner says there were passengers aboard the vehicle, and he does also say that several cars nearby, at least 6, exploded as a result of that initial explosion, as ambulances and fire trucks rushed to the scene to get to those injured. According to local media outlets, many of the casualties were dead before they even reached hospital. Several others are very seriously injured. Some eyewitnesses reported hearing the loudest explosion they had ever heard in their lives. One man, a local shopkeeper, said he was knocked down 3 times and he thought he was going to die as well. India's Home Affairs Minister Amit Shah visited the site of the explosion as well as the hospital where many of the injured are being treated. He says there will be a thorough investigation and no possibility is being ruled out at this time. He says all options will be investigated immediately, and when results are known, they will be made public. But still, there are a lot of questions here tonight as the country is grappling with this explosive country very much on edge because of this. This is a country that has been scarred in the past by attacks and bombings in urban areas. There was a string of them in the mid-2000s, blamed on militant groups. So this is a country on edge already. Delhi and Mumbai, big cities, are on high alert, as well as several neighboring states to the capital and border areas as well. And security is being ramped up around religious sites in parts of the country as this investigation continues. So we mentioned GC.
So as you can see, Angus, it is a very, very interesting situation there. And when I say interesting, I mean that in the most horrific of ways. And for all of those people who have been injured, all of those people who have lost their lives, that only starts a small fraction of the damage that these bombs will cause. Now, of course, you're looking at the psychological impact to not only residents of the area, but also to potential visitors. As I stated earlier, over 17,000 people a day go to that area as a major tourist attraction. This may have long-term impacts in that financial area of the tourism industry, but most importantly, what it's going to do for the locals now that they have seen this happen. And again, it hasn't happened there in over a decade. So now what is that fear going to instill with within the community and within the legal system? Are there going to be more patrols? Are there going to be acts of violence against people that may be acting what some would consider suspiciously? Are people going to take it into their own hands to act as vigilantes when they see something suspicious, even though there may not be? So again, we'll have to really keep a close eye on this. Now we'll take a quick look at what's being reported here on the BBC in terms of story. And again, it may contain some upsetting scenes, so viewer discretion is advised. And as you can see, this appears to be someone on scene using their cell phone, given the format of the image. So again, somebody there, but you can see just the wreckage, the parts of vehicles, and just everything strewn everywhere. And you can see the distance at which the different items were scattered and how devastating that is for the people on the ground. We will keep you up to date on this. We'll keep a close eye on the story as it evolves and to bring you updates tomorrow on the show as well. We're going to take a little look at something else that's very important in the news, and that is India's criminal justice system, and more particular, their jail system. Now, when you look at Tihar's prison system, where Jagtar Singh Johal is being held, this is a facility over 400% occupancy. So the different capacities for the different facilities, because this makes up a large complex of buildings and prison holding cells. They are over 400% of capacity. So that shows how crowded it is. International reports have come out that there are major concerns, whether that's health, safety, and security, that there is regular violence that breaks out within the prison walls, especially when you have that many people who are just crammed together. They are struggling for food. There's no quality control within the food system. They don't care about that. They don't care what the inmates are eating or if they're getting enough to eat. Furthermore, though, is that it is allegedly infested with rats, cockroaches, and other insects and rodents. And this not only presents a major safety factor where they could be bitten, but also the spread of disease that could be very, very rapidly spread throughout the whole prison system. This is a jail that system that holds over 533,000 individuals within the country of India. Now, if you take that into a perspective, they are looking at 73.5%. So that's 3 out of every 4 who are not actually convicted. They are being held without charge or pre-trial, as it's referred to, or under trial. Now, this, of course, includes Jaggi. He is in this hellhole, as I may refer to it, and I apologize if that term offends anybody, but at the same time, it is exactly what it is. Now, as I said, the national average for India is over 120% population of the prisons. So 20 people in addition to every 100 that they are built for. And that, again, is so much worse when you look at the Tihar jail, which is, as I said, over 400% over capacity. Now, they also are declaring it that it is not an actual prison system. They are using it to punish and really act as a torture center for anybody who is convicted of a crime. The worst part of their sentence is not actually after conviction and sentencing. It's the pre-trial while they're being held and detained, sometimes like Jaggi, for 8 years without a proper trial. This is life-threatening. This is not an isolated incident. It is a systemic failure of the judicial system. This is the fault of the government and the Correctional Services Department, because this has been going on for decades. It is not something new. It is not because of some miraculous upswing or uptick in crime rates. It is something that's going on for decades that the United Nations and other human rights organizations have been calling India out on, and they are still refusing to act on it. Jagtar Singh Johal was actually the subject of a report by the United Nations that not only looked into the torture and the other mistreatment of him within the prison system, but they've also called for an immediate release. And that, of course, India, they're receiving it on deaf ears. They are not taking any movement to make that happen. Now, as I said, the national average conceals a far dire reality, and that is 85 of the prisons that are operating at 200% over capacity, and 34 of them at an occupancy rate of over 250% over capacity. Now, this is a major concern when you look at the other issues that people have been addressing or bringing up with the India government. And that is that the Tihar prison complex is actually located in the heart of Delhi. It is in a major metropolis area. With the uprisings, with the violence and, excuse me, and the overcrowding, that very easily could turn into a public safety and public security nightmare if they were to breach the walls of the prison and make a major escape, or if rioting and other acts of mass violence were to break out in that prison system. It shows how quickly they would have access to the normal regular people on the street and the businesses, homes, and so forth. But does that really mean that they are a major threat? Well, again, probably not, because many of them, and they estimate, as I said, with 73.5% under trial, that they are basically sitting there just rotting for years without the evidentiary process, without the trial process, and without an actual conviction. Now, when you look at the marginalized groups, whether that's the Sikhs, whether that's the Muslims, whether it is anyone else, they are overrepresented in the prison system. When you look at this, the system disproportionately is affecting them. Now, Muslims, who constitute 14.2% of the national population, make up 19.3% of the under trial population. When you look at youth and the age ranges, it's a crisis of the youth as well, who are not seeing a great future in their country, but now they're also being disproportionately punished by a system that has no accountability. And that is nearly half, or 49% of all Indian under trials are between the ages of 18 and 30. So it again shows that major disparity in how the India government is failing to protect those who are most vulnerable. Now, there are other areas in which they have reports. They have internal, they have international, they have, the system itself reporting such overcrowding, the health concerns, there's no health services, the sanitation, where in one facility, 200 people are forced to share one toilet. And you heard that right, 200 people for one toilet. And of course, you look at the violence. Well, of course, you're going to have violence when they are subjected to this kind of condition. Now, when you look at the ongoing unsanitary conditions, the female population, or the female inmate population, is also, in the same predicament. However, because there are much fewer females, they actually, in some ways, are treated much harsher, even still, than the men. And this includes not providing personal care items or sanitation products and so forth. So again, the lack of nutritious meals, the reports of food that is just covered or filled with insects. There is absolutely no public accountability, and that needs to stop. But it gives you a bit of a context as to the urgency to see Jagtar Singh Johal removed from that facility and returned to his home where he belongs. And I've kind of abbreviated this report because I went a bit longer on the explosion, which was the bigger story here at this point. But feel free to check out this story on the India population population or the prisons and the jails on our Substack after the show. And Angus, I'll send it back to you because I could go on for a long time with this information. I've just tried to compress it and I probably missed some of the key points. But again, we'll have it on our Substack for everybody.
Yeah, not a problem, James. It's quite interesting actually because we talk about the Indian justice system on a regular basis because clearly there are prisoners who we would clearly label as political prisoners who have fallen foul of the Indian state. But it's quite shocking this because, and it's quite sad in many ways because in 1947, India, the new nation of India, inherited a functioning legal system, a very well-established, well-functioning legal system, a whole framework of legislation, and of course a legal system with all the infrastructure behind it that worked. It might not have been perfect, but it worked and it functioned very well. And they have managed to turn it into a monster ever since 1947. And I certainly, in my past many years ago, experience working with Indians and in India, is the levels of bureaucracy. And I don't know, if this is just a cultural thing with India, but the bureaucracy in India is just literally overwhelming in anything that you do. And again, I don't know if this is a cultural thing or whatever, or even deliberate, but the levels of bureaucracy within the legal system have just grown and grown and grown. As I said, they've evolved a functioning system into a monster, a system that is failing at every level. And certainly there is, clearly there is a deliberate part of this where we talk about the political prisoners, where the Indian state and the ruling elite of India have weaponized the legal system to attack and detain and hold and basically silence its political enemies. That is clear. That's definitely going on. But then, of course, the system is failing just the ordinary citizens who have no political stake in anything. They're just trying to stay alive and live their lives. And those who sadly fall foul of the law, whether deliberately or actually are innocent, but just get caught up in some sort of form of legal trap, they are then detained. And what is shocking is that 3/4 of these prisoners, 3/4, that's 3 in every 4 people in prison in India, as these statistics make very clear, have not been convicted of anything. They may well be innocent. So in other words, we're looking at over 300,000 prisoners out of the 500-odd thousand are in prison without conviction. And again, it's absolutely monstrous, and not just in a prison where it's relatively decent conditions. These are awful conditions in many of these prisons. So I think it's deeply sad, and I think what's more concerning for the Indian states, not that they seem to care, but one of the statistics, one of the nuances of this is almost half of that population, the prison population, is under the age of 30. Now, these youngsters, relative youngsters who end up in prison, particularly if they're innocent, they then start resenting the state. They start resenting the system. They start resenting society that has caught them up in this dreadful situation, and particularly if they're innocent. And what's it going to do? It's going to criminalise those who are innocent. It's going to turn them into criminals because they're going to be in awful conditions, angry, resentful, and surrounded by genuine criminals who are going to say, yeah, welcome to our world. I'll teach you a few things. And this is one of the problems about recidivism, is that when you send people to prison, they mix with other criminals and they tend to get absorbed into that mindset and become criminals. If they weren't criminals before, they certainly become criminals, and petty criminals become hardened criminals. And again, you're just generating and increasing the level of criminality in Indian society, because eventually these guys will hopefully be released back into society, but they are released with a new, different mindset, a mindset that is resentful and angry against the Indian state. And all you're doing then is just generating future problems. You're creating a whole new problem that didn't exist before. So again, it's a bit of a doom loop. It's a legal doom loop, a criminal doom loop that India is creating here. And it's deeply sad. And as I say, it's the two elements. There's the genuine criminality, but there's also the political prisoners. And we often use the phrase, justice delayed is justice denied. This whole story just completely encapsulates that very phrase. It is this delaying the justice is denying justice, particularly those who are innocent, of which many probably most likely will be innocent of any charge. So Anyway, just want to quickly touch on the Red Fort story because this is actually quite significant. What is it? We don't know yet. Of course, there's a huge amount of speculation right across certainly social media and indeed mainstream media. Some of the stories saying, well, it was potentially just a gas canister in the back of a car. Well, I think looking at even just as a non-expert, just looking at the impact of that explosion and the pictures coming out, that must have been one heck of a large gas canister because the debris and the devastation, the impact implies something a lot more significant than just a simple gas canister. So, of course, then speculation comes. Was it a bomb? Was it a deliberate? Was it a car bomb? And if so, who was behind it? And of course, particularly across Sikh social media, a lot of speculation saying, have we got another potential Pahalgam attack here, another potential false flag attack here? Who are they going to blame if indeed it was a bomb? Now, the likely candidates for such an attack would be Islamic extremism. We have seen Islamic extremism causing all sorts of terrorist acts, not just in India, but of course, but globally. So the immediate spotlight is on that. But of course, the Sikh population in India and of course across the diaspora are thinking, are they going to try and turn this on us? Are they going to try and blame it on Khalistani extremists? That's another one of their typical tactics, and try and smear the Khalistan campaign, particularly now it's gaining so much momentum, so much popularity. And of course, we have the referendum that is gaining popularity and of course gaining a lot of public discourse, both mainstream in India and indeed across the rest of the world. So could there be an attempt now to try and somehow attach such an attack on the Khalistan movement? We don't know, James, but it does raise a lot of questions. We shall see over the next coming days.
Absolutely. And we will, as I said, follow this very closely and keep our audience updated. All the viewers, if you have information, by all means, you're welcome to share that with us through the comments or to email direct to the show. And then just to give just a bit of a jump or just a bit of closure there, Angus, when we're talking about the 73.5% population that's under trial, in the Tihar jail complex, it actually jumps to almost 91%. It's 90.66%. So that is just amazing. Now, and just to close it off, for those people who were hearing the percentages, let's just go to real numbers. And that's a capacity in Tihar's individual jails, number one. It has a capacity of 565 inmates, but holding 2,436. And jail number 4 is designed for 740 inmates, while it's holding currently 3,244. So the real question is, why is the system allowed to fail all of these individuals so disproportionately? And again, why is Jaggi still in when there are these horrific conditions that show how he's being mistreated and how all inmates are being mistreated here? But especially for someone who is a foreign citizen who has done nothing wrong except trying to get information, research, and expose the dirty secrets of the India government.
Yes, I think when you look at those actual numbers and the absolute numbers, it's shocking, absolutely shocking. Yeah. And of course, poor Jagtar Singh Johal, a British citizen caught up in this terrible system. And we will keep highlighting his plight. But of course, it's not just Jagtar. There's many others who were detained really questionably under all sorts of questionable legislation. So anyway, James, let's move on to my first story. And I'm going to talk about... We talked a lot recently about how the Sikh population, particularly across the diaspora, has been targeted by all sorts of issues and attacks, and it's come from all sorts of different causes. It ranges from just literal hate crimes from right-wing extremists right across to actual attacks from physical violence and deadly attacks from India itself in the form of transnational oppression. And of course, the result of this is there is an increasingly public discourse on the Sikh population and how they are being targeted. And I'm just going to, the stories I'm going to talk through today, I'm just going to show this sort of evolution as well, and just how public and how mainstream a lot of this sort of news is becoming. And this is quite important because it is, in the past, certainly in my lifetime, I can't recall a time when the Sikh community, particularly here in the UK, has actually gained so much attention, so much publicity. And it's sad and tragic in some ways because, of course, the reasons why by the Sikh population is now hitting the mainstream news. But also there is a silver lining to this dark cloud, because it does mean that actually these issues are now starting to be addressed, and it is highlighting particularly the actions of India. And as I said in the introduction, it is actually these are actually paving the legal the stepping stones in place. These are putting all the necessary legal framework in place to argue for a sovereign Sikh state as Khalistan. It is necessary to show what is going on and to prove it. And the fact that the mainstream news is actually talking about many of these subjects is helping the legal case. Again, it's all about painting a picture in a court of law. Ultimately, it will come to a court of law to decide such things. And it does help create this culture, this awareness, this picture that's painted, joining all these dots to show just what actually is going on for the Sikh community globally and indeed, of course, in Punjab. So anyway, I'm just going to start domestically. Here in the UK, we've talked a lot about hate crimes, and again, there's been some terrible incidents recently, not least the 2 rapes of Sikh ladies, Sikh women in the Midlands here in the UK, that have been labelled very clearly as hate crimes, and they had elements, very clear elements, that meant they weren't just should we say, the standard sexual assault, terrible, outrageous sexual assault against women, that they actually had a very identifiable hate crime element attached to it. In other words, it basically was a racist crime, not just a sexual assault. Preet Kaur Gill, who's one of our longest serving Sikh MPs here in the British Parliament, she chaired a UK Parliament meeting about this rising anti-Sikh hate that certainly we're experiencing here in the UK, and it is, of course, the same across North America and other parts of the world. There has been this spate of recent crimes targeting the community. And unsurprisingly, most of them have actually been occurring here in the West Midlands in the UK, which is one of our larger diaspora population. But importantly, these discussions are now actually taking place on a regular basis in the British Parliament. Verinder Singh, he's another MP for Wolverhampton West, and one of the Midlands constituency, joined this meeting, and he actually did make a speech and he asked a question in Parliament recently. Let me just play you his question in Parliament.
Verinder Just.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the last couple of months, the West Midlands has seen a spate of racially motivated attacks on women of colour, including rapes of Sikh women, who now tell me that they are scared to walk on our streets or use public transport to go to work. Does the Minister agree that there is no place in Britain for any kind of racial hatred? These crimes must be punished to the full extent of the law, and what assurance can she offer women and girls in my constituency of Wolverhampton West that they will have the full protection of the police and the authorities so that they can feel safe?
I thank the honourable gentleman and, frankly, my neighbour in Birmingham, and share his real concerns about a spate of what appear to be racially motivated sexual violence. All I can say is that obviously some of these cases are in sub judice and charges have been laid, but I will absolutely give him my assurance that I've spoken to organisations who work with black and minoritised women on the ground to ensure that we can do everything that we can, along with police and other agencies, to make sure women where he and I live feel safe.
I mean, blah blah blah. It's a typical sort of lots of verbiage from the government spokesperson. But ultimately, the important point of this is that on an almost weekly basis now, we are seeing Sikh MPs stand up and actually raise these sorts of issues about the Sikh community. Again, we've not seen this in years past. So it's actually really, I would say, it's very encouraging to see that these Sikh issues are being raised on a regular basis, that actually attention is now finally being turned upon our Sikh population. They are being acknowledged as a minority that have issues. And again, there are bigger issues that certainly organisations like the Sikh Federation UK are trying to raise, and that includes obviously Jagtar Singh and Johal, but it also includes things like the 1984 investigation in terms of how the British government were involved in Operation Blue Star, etc., and of course rising hate crimes. But the point is that now again mainstream, and this again is all about how grassroots campaigning and lobbying by the Sikh community, and it's the same in North America, same in Australia, New Zealand and Europe, is that grassroots lobbying is having an effect, because what it's doing, it is increasing the number of Sikh political voices, MPs here in the UK. We've now got 11 Sikh MPs, and as a result of that, it means they are now having a democratic voice. As I say, on an almost weekly basis, a Sikh MP is standing up, asking a question, particularly about Sikh issues. So you can start to see how important these things are. Now, also in our upper chamber, that is our upper parliament, the House of Lords as it's called, a Labour peer, Lord Kuldip Singh Sahota, he also has raised the issues and again many issues related to hate crimes. But one of the issues actually that we do have is the fact that we don't log hate crimes enough, and they are not logged. There's been a huge movement, particularly again on behalf of campaigning groups, lobbying groups like the Sikh Federation UK, who've been trying to get installed policies that log hate crimes and specifically allocate them into the right, let's say, statistical bucket, so that policies can be specifically designed to deal with them. And again, and I often say and encourage our audience, if you're involved in a hate crime, it doesn't matter how small, it must be reported. Please report it, because unless the politicians and the policymakers know about these things and they are statisticized, or they're basically put into numbers and data, then nothing can be done about it. So anyway, Lord Kuldip Singh, he actually raised this issue in our House of Lords. Once again, Sikh issues being raised in our Parliament. And I just wanted to point this out, because this actually, and I don't want to go down this angle too much, because it's a whole discussion itself. But what Lord Kuldip has said is that he's called out the Reform Party for disrupting what he calls community cohesion with toxic politics. Now, this actually, I find a dangerous thing that Lord Kuldip has done, because he is blaming the Reform Party. And you see this a lot across social media and to some extent mainstream media, is that this is a very political, cynical ploy on behalf particularly of the Labour Party. The Labour Party is failing miserably, is failing spectacularly. Keir Starmer is the most unpopular Prime Minister we have ever had in the UK. He has deeply betrayed the Sikh population, our Sikh community, as I say on a regular basis. But as a distraction, they are looking for targets. They're looking for scapegoats for their mess. And the Reform Party is forming an easy scapegoat. And Lord Kuldip Singh is distracting this whole issue. And as I often say, one of the root causes of a lot of the hate crime, particularly against the Sikh community here in the UK, and it's the same in North America, exactly the same, and in Europe, is uncontrolled immigration, both legal and illegal. That is the root cause of a lot of the problem. That is the root cause that is provoking a lot of the right-wing extremists, but even ordinary right-wing people now are turning against our local ethnic communities because of over-immigration, uncontrolled immigration. And what Lord Kuldip Singh is trying to distract from this fact by blaming, it's the toxic politics of the Reform Party. No, the Reform Party are a symptom of the underlying cause. They are just highlighting the underlying cause. And as proof of that, why then is the Labour Party actually now adopting some of the proposals that Reform Party is saying about anti-immigration? Why is the Labour Party now actually having to finally act upon uncontrolled immigration? Because the Reform Party have actually raised this issue. So I just want to just highlight that fact. Don't blame the Reform Party whether you support them or you hate them. The Reform Party are not behind these problems. There are root causes of this, which we talk on a regular basis. So unfortunately, Lord Kuldip has actually, again, played a bit of a cynical game here. And this is bad, because it's actually distracting from the root causes of hate crime. And it's those root causes we need to address. So anyway, I just wanted to raise that point. Now, when I talk about mainstream, I'm now going to move this along a little bit. We talked about how Sikh issues are now being regularly discussed, certainly here in the UK Parliament. But again, we talk about how in the US and certainly Canada, how Sikh issues are, again, just gaining more and more attention, more and more publicity. This is a good thing, because these issues, our issues in the Sikh community, cannot be addressed until the mainstream adopt them and highlight them and push them in front of politicians saying, well, what are you going to do about it? Well, the good news is that once again, Sikh issues are hitting the mainstream, and increasingly so. There's almost like a crescendo of these issues hitting the mainstream. The mainstream media are now picking up, saying, oh, there are stories here. We need to report them. Here's another one. I'm going to report this. This was a recent interview on Sky News. Sky News is, again, one of our mainstream channels here in the UK. A well-known Canadian activist, Maninder Singh, he was interviewed alongside Jas Singh of the UK, of the Sikh Federation UK. They were interviewed on mainstream Sky News about Sikh issues. Here's just an excerpt from
and
that.
finally, back to you, Meninda. What is your next step now? Clearly, you're very concerned, and you've outlined the reasons why. Some might say, well, isn't it time to step down from the activism?
Yeah, I think that's what India wants. I think any country that would take this type of measure to try and silence voices, for them, silence is the best option, and driving that fear into communities is how they do it. So that won't happen, whether it's myself or Jazz here or Mr. Bannu or anyone else in our community that's actually struggling in this movement. I think it's shown us one thing is that, this is a dangerous space that India has kind of operated in. They've kind of come into the Western world, into these diaspora countries to shut voices down, and that won't happen. Our working with on the Canadian side is especially important right now around a public inquiry into India's role in all of this when we have all this evidence that's before us, because India is the only country that Canada knows of that has committed transnational repression and foreign interference where citizens in Canada were actually targeted, murdered, and our RCMP and the law enforcement has proven that as well. Okay. So I think our end goal here is not to go silent. Our end goal is that everything we're doing is actually being proven to be correct in calling India out. And if that means at the end of the day that our lives are at risk, we're willing to take that risk in order to support our people, our community in the diaspora and in Punjab for Khalistan.
Gentlemen, thank you both very much.
And I cannot understate the significance of this. This is a relatively small interview. It went on for about 10, 11, 12 minutes. But this is mainstream news. And two Sikh activist spokespersons have actually raised these accusations about India. They've raised the whole issue of transnational oppression. They've told the audience, this audience is massive. It numbers in the millions. Not just obviously Sikhs watching this. This is an audience across certainly the United Kingdom, but across Western democracies. White people are watching this. White people who view India as this friendly nation of gurus and yoga and all things spiritual. Suddenly they're saying, hang on, what's all this about murdering our citizens? We thought India was this nice, friendly country, and actually India has been coming into our countries and killing our Sikhs. Again, it's all about getting the points, educating the wider community to what actually India is up to. And here we have, as a result of what is going on, as I talked about this crescendo of publicity, the Sikh community, through its lobbying, through its activism, is actually now being interviewed, is now being invited onto these mainstream channels to talk about these issues, to highlight the fact of what India is actually up to. And again, when I talk about the legal case about the establishment of Khalistan, it has to be established that India has basically been up to what it's been up to. It's proving the point. And here we have, eventually, when this finally does reach an international court where they start deciding about the establishment of Khalistan, they'll say, okay, where's the evidence? Well, here it is, almost on a daily basis now. We are seeing across mainstream media, it's setting the context, this whole background context of awareness of what India is up to. It's extrajudicial murders of the Sikh population. It's proving the legal point that will be put across. And likewise, Bloomberg have just released a few days ago. They again, another huge mainstream news outlet, hugely resourced, watched by literally millions of people around the world. Again, this isn't just concentrated in small audiences like in the UK or ever. These are global news outlets that are picking up these stories, analysing them, researching them, and putting news packages together, talking about India's behaviour, talking about the targeting of Sikhs globally, the transnational repression, the murders of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, Avtar Singh Kandar, etc. So Bloomberg, and again, this is another news story that was put together. And I won't play the whole thing because it's actually rather long. It's over 20 minutes long. But let me just play a section. Let me just fast forward to about a minute in. Here we go.
Unfolding in New York City against one of Hardeep Singh Nijjar's close friends.
The only thing I knew at that time is that my life is in danger.
And the governments of the US, of Canada, concluded that the murder of Mr. Nijjar and the targeting of Mr. Panun were initiated by people in some way connected to the government of India, which was angered by their involvement in something known as the Khalistan movement, the campaign for the Sikh religion to have an independent homeland in Punjab in northwest India. India has said allegations it was involved in Nijjar's killing are absurd. It has sought the extradition and arrest of some Sikh separatists due to what it says are links to terrorism.
The issue is not about freedom of expression, but advocating violence and legitimizing terrorism.
people in the Sikh campaign for independence around the world do have a habit of turning up dead.
Paramjit Singh Panchwar was shot dead.
UK-based Sikh campaigner has died in the early hours of this morning.
Police say the killing of a man outside a Sikh temple Sunday night appears...
And on it goes. And I hope you noticed that Satellite TV, our own news report about Avtar Singh Kanda, was included in that Bloomberg report, which is great to see. But importantly, again, this is Bloomberg. Again, one of the largest mainstream news outlets reaching a global audience. And they are talking about, obviously, issues that we talk about on a daily basis. So we're familiar. The whole news story over 20 minutes just recounts everything that we talk about regularly. But don't forget, as I said, to reiterate once again, the audience of this is a global audience from all backgrounds, again, all around the world, who are now, for the first time, hearing about Khalistan. I mean, again, Khalistan flags. The beautiful yellow flag of Khalistan is now in full view, and the murders of activists pro-Khalistanis again being highlighted in full view to a huge multi-million audience around the world. This is how significant this is becoming. This is a result of the activism of so many of the activists out there in the world, in the Sikh community. This is the result of their work. In other words, activism, I will often talk about grassroots activism. When you get out there with your Khalistan flags, when you email your MPs, or when you lobby, just even your local spokespeople, when you get together, even in small groups, this is the end result. Because you might feel you're just one single voice, but when you start getting together, when you start being seen more and more, people start to take notice, and it builds up this momentum. This boulder of momentum is building and building. And again, I'm going to use this word crescendo. There is a crescendo of public awareness now. Bloomberg now reporting, as you can see, all the story about Nijar, and this story goes on, and it's a very well analysed story, but it includes all the issues that we talk about on a daily basis, and it concludes, actually interestingly, it does conclude at the end. It takes a very, let's call it a real politic conclusion that, okay, India is very important to the West. We need India, really, ideally, to align with the West, to use it as a buttress against China, etc. We do need trade deals because, we want to increase international trade for prosperity, etc. But at the same time, we cannot brush human rights under the carpet. So, as it highlights, the politicians have this terrible thin line to tread between respecting human rights, democratic values, but also trying to improve relations, the geopolitical arguments, etc., etc. So again, it's actually a very well balanced report. So do have a look at that report. As I say, most of it is stuff that we know already. But importantly, James, as I keep saying, this is mainstream. This is great to see. Is that now big important Sikh issues are hitting the headlines, hitting global news outlets. And as I say, it's great to see Khalistan flags there written right across the screens.
Absolutely. And when we look at the various stories or information that you've covered, Angus, there's quite a bit of context there and a lot of information. But the biggest point that you're making that I think the viewers need to take away from it is how far this information has come to hit the mainstream media and to get that significant coverage to the mainstream audience, not what some call a niche audience, being the diasporic audiences within the Western nations, but the mainstream, the entire viewership of Sky News, Bloomberg. I mean, we watch Sky News here in Canada. We get that, and they have a lot of followers here. So again, it reaches across all of those borders and gives a global context to the struggle that the Sikhs are having, whether that is the racially motivated sex attacks that are happening in the UK, whether it's the transnational repression in Canada, the attempted assassination of Mr. Penoon down in New York. I mean, it really shows how far this narrative has come to be able to reach finally the mass audiences.
Again, as I said, it's all about educating the wider world, particularly the English-speaking world, that India is not what you think it is. India is something quite different. And again, it's all about building up the momentum, particularly the legal case for the establishment of Khalistan. And these accusations, again, being broadcast against India, highlighting that what they've been up to is broadcasting to a global audience, which in turn is going to start influencing those legal courts that will decide eventually the future of Khalistan. So I'm going to wrap up my my segment with just a little congratulations. Swarnjit Singh Khalsa. I interviewed Swarnjit, gosh, it must be nearly 18 months, 2 years ago now. We had a great conversation a couple of years ago, and he's been very active himself in politics in Connecticut, particularly in Norwich, in Connecticut. And he, a few days ago, was elected the mayor for Connecticut, the first Sikh elected as mayor of Connecticut. And again, he's obviously been very active in his local community, highlighting Sikh issues. But again, it's just another example of a great success story of somebody who cares politically about their community, gets out there and starts being active, starts campaigning. This is where it can lead. And now it means that yet another area in North America has a Sikh voice, a Sikh democratic voice, influencing policy, influencing legislation, ensuring that Sikh issues are at the forefront, James. It's fantastic to see this. So congratulations to Swarnjit.
Absolutely. And to see what he can bring to the city, pretty exciting for the future, I think, of Connecticut.
And I did actually send my congratulations via WhatsApp overnight, which he acknowledged. So again, a very public well done to Swarnjit. It's a fantastic election. So, right, Jez, clock counting down. Let's move on to our comments section. And as always, loads of great comments. Thank you to our wonderful loyal audience, in particular our core audience, who are always there on a regular basis. Very much appreciated. And talking of which, one of our regulars, Jaspal Chatterfeld, wades in. The Indian government, here we go. We're talking about the Indian justice system. Its police have killed human rights activists from Punjab. Jagtar, as activists, is suffering the same fate to be a real Sikh. In other words, being a real Sikh, the obligation about being a Sikh is to stand up to injustice, is to point out oppression, injustice, etc. You have almost a moral obligation under Sikhi to do this, even to your detriment, to effectively to threaten your own life to stand up for this. And this is what many Sikhs have done, as Jagtar Singh Jahal proves. James, again, this is all about highlighting the Indian justice system. It's been politicised.
Absolutely, and something that we've been talking at great lengths about today and over the last several years. So it's good to see that we are not the only ones that have the same belief.
And KJB Singh follows up with the same theme. There's nothing like law and order in India. The judiciary has become a tool of oppression. It has. And we often say how the Indian state, the ruling elite of India, this Brahmanical upper caste of India who control the Indian state, they have now weaponized the Indian law. India has political prisoners who are held under dreadful pieces of legislation like the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, like the National Security Act, etc. These pieces of legislation that have literally been weaponized to carte blanche imprison political dissenters like Amritpal Singh, amongst many others, James.
Absolutely. And of that 90.6% of people held in the Tihar prison that have not been convicted of a crime, how many of those are the political prisoners?
Exactly.
Makes you wonder, Angus.
It is. It's absolutely shocking. And a nation that likes to call itself a democracy cannot genuinely do that with this going on. And stay safe. This is quite an interesting one. In fact, I have actually picked this up before. India has signed the UN Convention Against Torture, Inhuman or Degrading Treatment or Punishment. Yes, India signed this treaty. It's a global treaty brought in by the United Nations basically it's an anti-torture treaty, and India did sign it, but they have not ratified it. And as Stacey says, if you have a look at the world map of countries around the world that have both signed this UN Convention Against Torture and ratified it basically means that they have brought it into law in their own countries. In other words, it becomes law in their own countries that you cannot torture anybody. This map, let me show you this map. This is very telling. There you go. So all the countries in green, basically almost every single country on this planet has both signed and ratified the Convention Against Torture. That means it is illegal, even in their own countries, to torture any prisoner. Now, the exceptions to that are the greyed out countries, which obviously include Iran. I think that's Papua New Guinea and a few other ones there. And they're the countries that haven't signed it. Iran, again, unsurprisingly. And then, of course, standing out there in yellow is India. India is the only country on the planet that has signed the treaty but not ratified it. What does that mean? It means, yeah, we've signed it to say publicly, yeah, we're against torture, but we're not going to actually make it illegal in our own country. In other words, it's a nonsense. They may as well have not signed it. What this is actually messaging to the world is that we in India will torture people. We support torture. Now, James, this is no surprise to us. We often regularly talk about how pretty much every jail in India has a torture cell. And again, it's been reported by many of my podcast guests that every police station in India has a torture cell. Torture is part and parcel of so-called Indian justice. India tortures its prisoners.
Absolutely. And as we look at those under trial, I mean, they're being tortured at an alarming rate and they aren't even convicted. So it is just a matter of time before the world stands up and says, okay, now it's time to either implement some changes or just we've got to start offering some type of incentive for India to participate in these human rights calls, because they obviously aren't hearing the messages that are being sent loud and clear from around the world saying it's time to really respect human rights in India. They don't care.
I mean, this is the world's largest so-called democracy. We are the world's largest democracy, says Narendra Modi, and yet he goes an absolute embarrassment. It's shameful. Anyway, let's move on. Azad says this is. And I have to actually give credit to Dr. Singh Sandhu for this quote. He said, "We want a Sikhi Raj, not a Sikh Raj." Great way to put it in perspective. Yeah, as I say, it was a phrase I used, but I got it from Dr. Sandhu from my podcast a couple of weeks ago. Dr. Sandhu said this, and this is a really important nuance because it is not a Sikh Raj. It is not, when we talk about Khalistan, it is not going to be a Sikh theocracy. It is not going to be completely controlled and that every citizen has to become a Sikh. It will be a Sikhi Raj. In other words, the country, Khalistan, will be run under Sikhi principles and morals. The whole foundation, the foundational morals of what Sikhi is, what it stands for, they will form, again, the fundamental moral foundations of what Khalistan is. It doesn't mean you have to become a Sikh. You just have to align with those values. And of course, those values also align with normal, democratic, decent, civilized values that we have here in the West, James.
Absolutely. And look at going back to when we allowed when we tested AI to see what they would recommend if, not when, but just if in a hypothetical, certain religious or cultural existence was to rule the world in terms of policy. And every time AI was picking Sikhi because of the principles that are not only in line with, as you said, the different democracies, but also the shared belief in everything from supporting each other and equality and all of those things. So again, it just shows once again that that's reiterated.
Absolutely. And what do we stand for on this channel? Well, we stand for the truth. As Hardal Singh points out, the truth is the truth, nothing but the truth. Truth will always prevail. Yes, absolutely. And as I say on an almost daily basis, the truth always prevails in the end. It might take some time to get there. And another phrase often used is the people always win in the end. The people represent the truth, and the truth will always prevail in the end, James. This is why the likes of India and the ruling elite of India cannot prevail, is that they are basically sitting on a time bomb, a ticking time bomb, because ultimately the people and the truth always prevail. You can only keep a lid on it for so long. Ultimately, it will always explode without exception.
Absolutely. And, we could take that even further, Angus, in the world that the people will prevail, but the lucky ones are the species that don't have to deal with people.
Yes, indeed. How true. And Subek Singh, again, this is improving my Punjabi thanks to Google Translate. And I thought, oh gosh, this is going to be another rude comment, because what this translates as is, who is this guy? And I thought, oh, here we go again. I'm going to have another barrage of abuse. Well, actually then goes on to say, it's great that the world has come to know about our genocide. Well, again, thank you for the comment. comment, Subig Singh. Yes, ultimately, who is this guy? Well, James and I, we appear on Perspectives because we are deeply passionate about the cause. Firstly, of course, the Sikh community, and I often talk very warmly about the Sikh community because they are deeply popular here in the UK, and certainly likewise in other English-speaking countries, because of the contribution that the community gives to our society. And the suffering that the community has seen, it's been a real eye-opener for me and James. As I say, we often talk about how we're on this educational journey. It has really been an educational journey where we've been brought away from the propaganda of India, of what India represents, into actually the truth. We've peeled back the layers, and it's been deeply disturbing and shocking, I have to say, what we have uncovered and what we've learned. And this is why James and I have become, forgive me for speaking on your behalf, James, but basically this is why we've become aligned, so deeply aligned and passionate about the cause, not just the cause of the Sikh people, but the whole concept of Khalistan. For us, there is nothing bad to say about Khalistan. Everything that Khalistan stands for it would be such a positive impact on the world from so many different levels. And again, we don't have time to talk about why, again, we talk about it regularly. But ultimately, James, this is why you and I are involved. Who is this guy? Who are these guys? We're just two guys who have really deeply become aligned with the whole concept of Khalistan and the whole values of Sikhi, because they represent the same values that we hold, James.
Absolutely. And I'll leave it at that, Angus, just in the interest of time ticking down. But you're absolutely right, and I agree with everything you stated there.
Great. And the final set. M. Verdi, again, one of our regulars. Good morning, guys. Love your show. Well, good morning to you. And we love your comments, so do keep them coming. And Harmail saying, thanks, mister. You're best for news. Well, we certainly hope so. We try to bring you the truth. We do our best. And SSI saying, awesome program. Every word you said is the truth. Again, that word comes up again. Truth, truth, truth. How important it is. This is why you guys out there need to spread the word. Please get the word out there that we are bringing the truth. It's not the propaganda coming from the Gody media. And Stacey says the emphasis of spoken word sound real to me. Angus and James back to the cause of freedom. Together we can fix the problems of the world today. Freedom feels good. Well, I don't think James and I can fix the problems of the world, but we do our best. And certainly our little voices from our little corner of the world, we hope at least they're being heard by some part of the world, which is great. And the final comment, of course, goes to Mastan Singh Dulai. Solution is, we all know the solution, James, don't we?
Khalistan, baby.
Khalistan Zindabad. But on that positive note, as always, we'll bring Perspectives to a close for another day. Thanks so much for watching, as always. Thank you so much to our loyal audience. Do keep the comments coming in. Thanks for great comments. Do let us know anything that you wanted us to talk about. As many of you have been doing in the comments, if there is stories or little snippets of rumours that you hear, pop them in the comments, because it's always interesting for us to research and dig in deeper to see if there is actually a story there that needs to be reported, as many of you have done. So thank you for that. Don't forget, of course, you can message us directly at message@sutlodgetv.com if you want to talk to us directly. But that is it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.